Hello everyone, and welcome to the Sydney, Melbourne and rest of the world Office 365 Business User Group. We've got an impressive panel today to talk about innovation and ideation. We have Matt from Sideways 6, who I'll introduce shortly, Emily from Swoop Analytics. Our mystery customer is ANZ's Community Manager, Ryan, and also Angus Florence from Microsoft. The first thing I'd like to say is we're going to mainly do a panel like we have done with our business user groups in the real world. So we're keen that we actually have some interaction. First thing we're going to do is see if you can actually answer a couple of questions interactively using, you'll need to go to a separate browser, but if you go to menti.com, you'll be able to answer the first question, which is, how do you feel about returning to work? It's been a challenging 2020 and will carry on being so we'd be very interested to just capture your thoughts and how you're currently feeling about the return to work, especially if you're in Victoria and I'm in Sydney, and obviously around the world people in different states. So have a go. The code is in the side chat, so if you want to look for the codes to go to Mentimeter, it's 806941. And we do have a second question. I'm an evangelist for Microsoft with Engage Squared. We're a Microsoft partner. Been very busy week because obviously Inspire's been on this week, which is a very active week for partners. I want to just show you, as we're talking about innovation, something that we use as a maturity model in very much in Yammer. This is from those that know him, a guy called Simon Terry, who's a bit of a legend in the Yammer and the sort of innovation community. He's based in Melbourne. And just the second question you'll see in the interactive question is about how mature you think your organization. So in this case, we're asking you as an organization how you would rate your organization as a social interaction online. Are you connecting with each other successfully? Are you sharing successfully? And as you go up the maturity model, you go to solving business issues and problems. This is very much what we want to talk about today, and that the ultimate sort of collaborative interactive network, enterprise social network, if you like, is when you really get innovation coming from employees and the collaborating with each other. So we would rate the maturity of your network as being innovative. So just that's the second question, and we'll come back to that. Swoop Analytics does a lot of this sort of work, so I'll ask Emily to bring us back to that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sideways 6. I have been aware of the work of Sideways 6 for quite some time, since I was a customer success manager for Yammer. They were always known as the leaders in ideation, and they very much plugged into Yammer in the day, and now they plug into other things. So I'm very appreciative of Matt Kavler for getting up early in London. He's having his coffee while we're hanging out for a wine, and I'd like to firstly see, Matt, if we can switch over to you and see what do organizations typically want to collect ideas about that you're seeking?
Sure, thanks very much for the introduction, Mark, and a very good morning, good afternoon to everyone wherever you are in the world. So I think it's a really great question to kick off with, really. And I think sort of before we dive into kind of the themes, I think employee ideas can sort of be seen as a multi-pronged tool for solving organizational challenges. So large organizations are starting to see this more and more and more. And when it comes to sort of collecting ideas, this is a tool that can be used across a lot of different parts of the business and to address a lot of different challenges. So we've actually recently published our most up-to-date version of our lookbook, which is essentially a collection of the 10 sort of most common types of campaigns that we see. So employee ideas can really stretch from sort of those kind of soft benefits like employee engagement, employee experience, customer experience, all the way up to things like sustainability, cost saving, site safety, and some really impactful challenges that really affect the bottom line of businesses. So I think what's important to also highlight here is, regardless of the theme that an organization picks, the kind of question they want answered, time and time again, we see a win-win situation coming about. So what I mean by that is it's a win for the business and it's a win for employees, no matter what you go out to try and solve. So the reason this is because businesses, when they listen to employee ideas, they get higher rates of innovation, they get better ideas, they're able to solve challenges more quickly and get ideas from the people that knows those challenges the best. And equally for employees, they feel more engaged because they're being listened to. And when they feel more engaged, when they're listened to, they do better work and ultimately stay with companies longer. So it's a win for organizations because they get all those lovely business benefits. It's also a win for employees because they feel heard and they feel that their employer cares about the ideas that they have. I think with sort of COVID coming around, we've definitely seen the emergence of a couple of new themes. Back to work is definitely one we're speaking to customers about at the moment. How can we get employees back into the organization safely? How can we get customers back into stores safely? And how can we keep employees engaged when they are remote? So this is a key theme that's coming through a lot at the moment. And a lot of research is coming out around employee engagement being a C-level conversation that needs to be had at the moment. And organizations are seeing employee ideas as a great vehicle for engaging employees when they are remote.
Nice. And what are the key things that organizations need to think about when they want to sort of collect ideas? Now, obviously in Yammer and Teams and other online platforms, we can get individual ideas, but if you want to do something at scale, what would you be suggesting to organizations? What are the things that they should be considering?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question as well. And I think before sort of diving too much into the detail there of kind of the innovation process, it's really important to start with why. So any sort of Simon Sinek fans will know why it is so important to start with why. But this is sort of what we really push organizations to think about when we start talking to them is, why do you want to go out and listen to employee ideas? What are you trying to achieve? If you get that why really pinned down and understand what you want to achieve, it's going to act as a fantastic foundation to build upon, and it will guide and sort of act as a North Star in sort of everything you do. Outside of that, there's kind of six, we call it the sideways 6 pillars. There's kind of 6 areas that you really need to think about when collecting employee ideas. And if you can get these sort of 6 pillars right in your head and understand what you're going to be doing at each stage, you're on to a winner when it comes to a great employee ideas campaign. So that first sort of stage, that first pillar is definitely capture. So you want to think about, how are you going to capture ideas? What's the practicality of this? How will you reach the communities that you want to get their great ideas? And then the second one is managing ideas, right? So you've collected ideas, you've got them, you've done the practical part, but you really need to understand and think about how we're going to manage these ideas and how we're going to sort of move from, say 1,000 ideas to 500 ideas to 10 ideas for implementation. And what kind of funnel are we going to use to manage that? Who's going to manage these ideas? How long are you going to spend managing these ideas? This is all really important questions to sort of ask yourself in that stage. Finally, shortlisting. So how are you going to choose the best ideas? So we sort of typically advise organizations to shortlist either via crowd or via experts or by both, which is the sort of ideal state. So crowd review would be number of likes, number of comments on an idea, how popular an idea is. It's a really quick and easy way to see which ideas are sort of bubbling to the top. And then review by experts is where you would ask experts within an organisation who know about the ideas to sort of do a bit of a sanity check and to review ideas to pass them on to the next stage. Once that kind of shortlisting exercise has been done, you want to think about the implementation stage. So how are you going to go from idea to a real life project? What's the budget around that? Who's going to be running these projects? And essentially, how do you bring the best ones to life? The kind of pillars outside of that happen all the way through this innovation process is the engagement. So you want to be able to keep employees engaged when you're listening to their ideas. So it kind of defeats the object of going out and asking, right? If you get loads of ideas and then an employee hears nothing back about their ideas, they don't feel engaged. So you want to make sure that there's that feedback loop, that communication cycle around ideas. Hey, your idea's been passed to the next stage. Congratulations, your idea's been brought to life. This is all really important stuff for employees to get feedback on their ideas, to just make sure they do really feel heard. And then equally analytics. So looking across the funnel, what's performing well, who your best contributors are, what the most popular type of idea is. This is all really great insight because it allows you to iterate and move forward with your employee ideas campaign as you repeat this and make it better.
Nice, great summary. And I guess, how does it actually work? So if people are really excited, want to do this at sort of scale, my understanding is you've integrated with Office 365. So I just wanted to see why you went down that route and how that works for organizations.
Great. So I think the main thing that this is talking about is adoption, right? So we all know that adoption of tools, digital tools at large organizations is really, really tough. And actually, Gartner's research has shown that 80% of collaboration efforts fail due to lack of adoption. It makes sense, right? If you say our biggest customer is Nestle, they've got over 200,000 employees around the world. If you go out to 200,000 employees and say, we've got this new app for you to download, log in, learn how to use the app, and then share your idea. This acts as a barrier for sharing ideas. So you're going to get low adoption, which means you're going to get low ideas, and essentially it won't be a repeatable process because there's a barrier for people sharing their ideas. So this is sort of where we sort of wanted to take a different approach. And we wanted to integrate into the tools that employees are already using. So, Microsoft's got some incredible tools like Yammer, like Teams, and these are amazing places for people to communicate and collaborate. And we didn't think it was any point in reinventing the wheel because this is where communities already exist digitally. This is where ideation and ideas are already happening. People are already talking on Yammer, they're already talking on Teams, and they're already having those ideas in that environment. So for us, it made sense to tap into that environment and draw those ideas out. And I'm just going to sort of take you through a bit of a story with one of our customers to highlight that. So you may not have heard of Centrica down in the Southern Hemisphere, but Centrica are essentially the largest natural gas supplier here in Europe. And this is a really great example of tapping into an existing community. So for Centrica, they really understood their why, which was really important. So their why was really clear. They wanted to save money and they wanted to increase customer satisfaction. So we started working with Centrica, and they had, like I said, this really great Yammer community. So all they needed to do to start collecting ideas was to create a new Yammer group. They named it Make a Great Idea Count. And this really quickly became a place where people were familiar, with which they could share ideas. And they saw some incredible business benefits as a result of doing this. So one idea that they had saved them £5 million a year. Now, this is an idea that someone in the call center had. They were, calling customers, and people's boilers are broken down, and they were sending engineers out to fix boilers. Essentially, engineers were then getting to people's houses and finding that no one was home. So they'd wasted that time, they'd wasted that petrol, and they wasted that resource. So the idea was, why don't we allow customers to text back? So they shared this idea within Yammer. It was picked up by Sideways 6, managed through the innovation funnel, and eventually brought to life. And so with customers being able to text back, engineers weren't turning up anymore. They saved that time and they made that incredible saving. And equally, as a result of that, their customer satisfaction went up. So it's just a really fantastic example of tapping into a really great existing community, drawing the ideas out, and realizing those really powerful business benefits.
That's great, Matt. That's a really exciting ROI. And in terms of both adoption and customer satisfaction, I have to say that's right in the sweet spot of the work that I do with Engage Squared. And I know it's what Emily O'Brien does as Director of Customer Success for Swoop Analytics. So we might shift over, thanks Matt, and we might shift over to Emily, and she can also see how we're going in terms of people returning to work.
Thanks, Mark. So what we have, I'm just doing a bit of a sense check of some of the ideas and answers that we've had coming through for that first question as well. So I'm hoping on the screen you'll be able to see that there's actually quite a consistent theme that seems to be emerging in some of those keywords that have popped up. So we have a lot of people saying that they're feeling unsure about returning to work. They're feeling anxious, nervous, completely just not interested. There's actually a few ones in there saying that they're excited, looking forward to the new normal, those sorts of things. So bit of a broad spectrum, but I think there's definitely some key takeaways there. I might also just quickly give an introduction from myself too. So as Mark mentioned, I work with Swoop Analytics and I look after customer success in the APAC region. For those who haven't heard of Swoop before or haven't seen Swoop, we provide self-serve analytics for Yammer and Microsoft Teams to help you better understand how your organization is collaborating and engaging. So we like to think of it as sort of like your own personal Fitbit for collaboration. So we have some really cool looking dashboards that you'll be able to see things like your collaboration personas, how many interactive users you have, and also being able to deep dive into certain topics or communities, or even business units as well. And we can go all the way down to the individual level. But I actually wanted to talk to you guys as well a little bit about curiosity and the importance of curiosity in organizations and asking questions. And in just a moment, I'm also going to invite one of our Swoop customers. We have Ryan here from ANZ as well, who's going to share some of the really cool stories of what's been happening on their Yammer network as well. But just to give you a little bit of an overview on what I mean when I'm talking about curiosity, it should be playing a pretty big role in organizations, if it's not already. And I'm hoping after today's session, where we're speaking about more of the idea generation and innovation, that you'll be able to take some of these ideas back to your organizations as well. So we've actually been looking at curiosity levels in organizations for a very long time at Swoop. And we can only really listen to each other when we start to ask questions. And the measure of curiosity is quite simply looking at the percentage of messages that are framed as questions. So whenever we see a question mark appearing on Yammer or on Teams, we'll take those into account. And the reasons why it's so important for organizations to be asking questions is because we found through our research with Swoop that asking questions leads to on average 150% more responses. And of course, this is also a super timely conversation to be happening throughout the COVID period, because we've actually seen some quite interesting correlations and rises in curiosity levels when we look across some of our benchmarking data as well. Before I get to our super interesting customer case study example, though, I just also wanted to mention that we've recently collaborated with Oscar Trimboli, who is a deep listening expert. And this is just to learn a little bit more about the importance of asking questions. And one of the key things that I wanted to call out from some of these conversations we've been having with Oscar is that not all questions are created equally. And we can sometimes see quite a lot of those why questions being asked in places like Yammer and Teams. But the actual fact is that these sorts of questions aren't always as productive as they could be. And just a quick tip for everyone in today's session as well, the questions that are most powerful are typically the questions where you are asking how and what. Just to give you a few quick examples, we could be looking at questions like, what can the leadership team be doing to make your job easier? Or how could we be doing this better? Or how does this frustrate you in your current role? And we've also found that you have the potential questions that focus on more of the negative side of things as opposed to the positive seem to perform better in terms of generating more of those ideas and feedback and answers as well. So just as an action off the back of this, I know I've just given you a few of those quick tips there, but we have a white paper and a full interview, which is available to download on the Swoop website. And I think we'll pop the link to that in the Q&A section if you want to access that. But now I think this is probably the best time to bring in our friend from ANZ. We have Ryan here. I don't know if I'm sharing my screen anymore. I might just, no, I'm not sharing anymore.
No, you're not.
Okay.
So we can, Ryan is around. So, and I think your questions you've asked are really useful in this context of looking at asking questions, especially leaders asking questions around the return to work, the return to new normal. How do we do things? This is where we do need to go back to employees, and we need to show some leadership. So I think it's a very pertinent time. Hi, Ryan.
Hi. How are you?
We're all anxious, curious, unsure, nervous. Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, great. I like the 2050 comment. That was mine. It makes me think of an example we've got at ANZ. One of our employees who's active on the network. We've got a community for our staff who work in our Docklands office, and one for our staff who work in the Sydney office. And it's this big long poll with different dates and years of when people think we might end up actually being back in the office. And it's really, I don't know if it's sad or cool, but it's been really interesting to see people voting on that poll. And sort of in March, people were saying, yep, we think it's going to be, April, May, June, that we'll be back. But he's actually just had to repost that poll because now people are saying, well, now I need options for 2021, 2022, 2024. So it's interesting to see how people's expectations are changing. A simple thing, but yeah, it's giving us an idea of how people are thinking and feeling about coming back to work. I might just go back a step and introduce myself as well, and a little bit about ANZ for anyone that doesn't know me or doesn't know much about ANZ. So we're one of the big 4 banks in Australia. We operate in 32 different markets across the globe, and we've got about 50,000 employees across the globe as well. So quite a large global organisation. Our head office is based in Melbourne, and much of our operations out of Australia as well. So that's a little bit about us. My role is the Social Business Development Manager. So essentially that's all about adoption and awareness of Yammer, and sort of finding where the business value is. So where there's a blocker or a challenge or an opportunity within different parts of the business where we think there's a good a Yammer, or we like to say where there's a Yammer shaped hole in the business that we can help them fill. So that's about me. So I want to share a few examples. Are you fine for me just to go straight into examples? Did you want to ask questions, or you just want me to keep going?
You keep going. I was very interested to know what ideas or examples of ideas that you've been able to sort of generate from your Yammer network.
Yeah, totally. So obviously for 2020, it has absolutely been the year of the crisis. There's been so many things thrown at us this year. So a lot of my examples are going to connect back to that. But if we go back to a couple of examples from the start of this year when we had the massive Australian bushfires, we obviously had a lot of conversation about that on our Yammer network right across the globe. And it was interesting to see that a lot of people were sort of individually in their own different communities posting their either ideas for how they could support communities impacting by the bushfire, or they were actually asking how they could support and really keen to lend a hand but weren't sort of sure how. I'm just going to try and share my screen quickly because I'll share a couple of good posts with you. Let me just go into slideshow mode so that looks a little bit nicer for everybody. Cool. So this is just an example of a couple of posts that we saw. So as I said earlier, we operate in 32 different markets. We've got lots of Yammer uptake in lots of different communities. So we had about 2,500 people talking about the topic of bushfires. And so we've got an example here from Philippines. They were holding a white elephant sale where 100% of the proceeds were going to a bushfire donation drive. We had the team in Japan as part of our institutional business holding a tea ceremony where they were raising funds for the bushfire appeals in Australia. And we sort of thought, right, well, people are doing these really cool things and there's a really strong appetite here to help. How do we connect all of these people with each other so that they can actually share and connect on some of those ideas? So we created a bit of a pop-up community on Yammer, just titled Australian Bushfires, and started to move. We just literally all we did was started moving some of those conversations into that central place so that people would sort of start to see each other's ideas and connect with one another. A couple of things that worked really well. This post here on the left was from somebody in our small business bank sharing a couple of the external social campaigns that were going on in Australia to support local businesses and providing lists of customers that you could shop with and support. And one on the right from the marketing team who were offering to do creative work and support some of our customers with copy writing for their website, for their social media and stuff like that to help them boost their business over that time. So that's stuff that was really helpful. I mean, we had people from different parts of Australia jumping in and saying, hey, my customers would love this. This would really help them, and making connections that way. But the best idea that we saw during the Australian bushfires crisis, we had somebody post a really cute image of some joey pouches that they'd started. Sorry, I guess just knitting for animals that were impacted by the bushfire. So koala mittens, joey pouches, and things like that. And that was one of our most talked about topics on the network for the whole bushfires situation or season, I guess I should call it. We had employees from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and even other countries further abroad actually seeing this conversation, seeing this idea and jumping on it and actually knitting joey pouches and things like that for impacted animals in impacted regions across Australia, which is pretty amazing. So it's a really cool example, have one small little idea. When you connect people together with that idea, it can really take off and have a really meaningful impact. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute.
I assume they're making masks now. Have they got people making masks? Is that out of stock?
Surprisingly, not yet, actually. But what people are doing there, we've seen a couple of people asking about where they could buy masks from customers, because we're seeing a lot of our customers through this pandemic pivot their offering. So we've got customers that are making hand sanitizer who were previously making gin, some who were starting up side hustles now to sell masks online and things like that. So there's a lot of activity around where can I buy these, how can I support customers and buy from a customer, and that type of stuff is happening through the COVID pandemic as well, which is really good. So, and that brings me to COVID, our next crisis for 2020, so and possibly into 2021, who knows, or maybe something else will come up this year. Let's just see what happens, I suppose. So what COVID's a really interesting one, because it's really it's led to a lot of ideas and innovation in a few different ways. So firstly, it's really made us think about and innovate and change the way that we connect and communicate with our people through this time. It's created, Yammer's been a really good place for people to sort of share their ideas and almost coping mechanisms with one another of how to get through the pandemic, how to work at home with kids, barging into your office every 5 minutes and all of that type of thing. And then also a really powerful way for us to get ideas and feedback from our people about how do they actually want to work when this thing's all over, and what have we learned about in the last 3 months we want to take forward with us into the future workplace. So I'll talk to the first example, which is how we've changed the way we communicate with our people. So when we all moved to working from home, we didn't actually have the infrastructure immediately available to enable everybody to log on to their computers at home on day one. So it was something we didn't foresee. You know, you would have 50,000 people logging on at home all at the same time. So we really quickly, our technology team had to really quickly ramp that up, but it took a few weeks. So we had a massive group of people that couldn't get emails on their work computer and couldn't get onto our intranet site. So we actually created an awareness and alerts community on Yammer. We added people to that and actually used that as a way to push really urgent updates and alerts out to people straight into the palm of their hand, straight into their mobile device. And so that they could access that information in a really clear and easy way, we sort of closed comments off in the threads in that conversation. So this is something I need to know, something I need to consume. And then we created a separate place where people could ask questions that they had and raise concerns and issues and things like that. So that one was quite messy and quite all over the place, and that was fine for people that wanted to ask a question or have a bit of a chat. And then we had the other community where people get those one-way updates that they really needed to get. So that was kind of a really radical change in the way we communicated with people, because typically it's an email or it's an intranet article, but what happens when you can't rely on those things anymore and you really need to really quickly pivot and change the way that you keep people updated. So that is one example. I'll just show you a couple of posts as well that sort of some COVID inspired ideation and sharing that we had happening on the platform. Cool. So one of the communities we had pop up that we thought was really cool was the working from home with kids. And I shared earlier that one of the things we saw our people do is share some really cool ideas and examples of how they've been able to sort of cope and adjust to this working from home life. And one of my favorite ones on the right hand side here, the traffic light system that one parent put on the outside of their office door to sort of, you know, an amber, come in if it's urgent, red, you know, ask someone else or deal with it yourself, and green, you're fine to interrupt. So that sort of thing. We had stacks of people sharing ideas and things like that people were loving, and that was creating a whole heap of conversation. The other thing that I mentioned at the start was how we've used Yammer to capture feedback from people and sort of understand what people want the future workplace to look like in the post-COVID world. Another cool example before I go into that, obviously the one on the left, this video from our CEO Shane, it's such a cool, different way to connect and communicate with people. And I have to say that it wasn't even our idea. I wish this was my idea, but this was totally his idea. He was at our head office building in Collins Street, walking around. Obviously, it looked very different with a lot less people in there. And he pulled out his phone and decided to do a little bit of a tour of the building and show people how it was different, what it looked like. You know, there were still people there performing essential functions, but outside of that, it was pretty quiet. And then, of course, ask the question at the end. You can't see that because it's hidden there, but about how people are adapting to their new workplaces, wherever they might be in the world or at home. You can see that was seen by like almost 7,000 people, 11 shares, and a bunch of comments as well. Sorry, that just disappeared for some reason. So I think that was just a really inventive and creative way to connect with people in a really meaningful way. And then on the right hand side, we've got our Deputy CEO, Alexis George. Again, this was sort of unprompted by us, but they were sort of thinking about the design for the future of work. So she posted this poll about, it's actually quite similar to the question we asked at the start of this session, about how people felt about returning to work and how often they might want to come back. And then what some of their concerns were around returning to the office. So 3,500 votes, or more than 3,500 votes on this poll, kind of blew everyone away. I don't think we've ever had a poll with that many votes on it at ANZ ever before. This was definitely the first time we've seen such significant results, which shows that it was something that was really important to people. I won't share the responses, but I will just say, quite similar to the responses we got in the poll today, very mixed, and some people very much not feeling comfortable coming back. But the real value in this was really getting the feedback from our employees, and you can see these two comments here below that were very much reflective of the conversation. People were just so concerned about catching public transport, and that was really the number one issue that we had, or that people had on their minds. And that actually prompted Alexis and the team to sort of step back and think, okay, well, we need to think a little bit more about our approach for people to work from home, because a lot of people, until this thing's over, are not going to want to travel into the office very regularly. So, you know, perhaps our initial thought process wasn't going to be quite right for people, which has prompted a massive piece of work, which we're dubbing the future of work at ANZ. We've got a pop-up squad working on it to try and work out what are the cultural needs that people have, what are the workplace technology needs that people have, and how do we design a workplace of the future that's going to be really innovative and suit those needs. And so we're actually, and this was you know, something that our CEO is really pushing to an all-company Yam Jam at the end of next month, where we're actually going to be capturing people's ideas and suggestions for what that should all look like. And then that's going to be built into our roadmap for the next 2 or 3 years to sort of as how the workplace and what the workplace is going to look like. So that's just going to be such a cool example of, you know, of ideation and sort of using those ideas to actually drive a business outcome, I think, which is really important as well.
That's awesome, Ryan, and I love the traffic lights. I think a lot of us are going to use that at home. I hope that my cat will recognize the traffic lights. So really, a really fun way. And obviously, you're looking at the big picture. So I think we'll definitely rate you as a mature social network in terms of collaboration around ideas at ANZ. Really great stories. And on that note, we might see, hopefully a few people have been able to fill out our second question. And Emily, are you able to call that and see how we're going? So this is,
yes.
Wow, you can talk us through it.
Okay, so the results are in, guys. It's actually quite interesting to see. There's well, it's getting close to being quite an even split between the 4 levels of that maturity model. So we can see that those earlier levels of maturity and connecting and sharing seem to be reflected a little bit higher than those later stages as well. Any other comments to add there, Mark?
I think I think the assumption is for people that innovation or solving how we go back to work is easy. It isn't, and so you do need a foundation in any network. And I think Sideways 6 are onto this, and obviously ANZ, where you actually need a community, and you need a connected community before you can really get people into further down in terms of solving and innovating. And there's probably no better person to talk about this than Angus Florence. So we might actually go to Gus now, put him on the spot, the man from Microsoft, and see. I mean, that was great from ANZ. Could you maybe share, Gus, what you might have seen over your many years at Yammer and Microsoft, what you might have seen in terms of people trying to mature their network to actually innovate and solve problems at scale?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me, Mark. It's always a pleasure to be seeing all these faces. I actually would rather just listen to Ryan's stories. I thought they were amazing. And thanks for sharing that, Ryan. It's always fun to hear you talk. Yeah, I mean, we've seen lots of stuff over the years. I think you hit it on the head there, Mark, when you're talking about it. It's really about, speaking of red lights, it's really about having those conditions for success. Yeah, and unless you've got a network or a community there of people going, a lot of the stuff's going to be hard to do. So I think I've kind of seen, and I don't have the data that Sideways 6 or Swoop have, but certainly I see 2 types of, I guess, innovation across customers. One is that more traditional, maybe like ideas campaign, like we want to run an idea about this or get your feedback about these things. You know, your David 30, maybe a leader comes up and says, hey, what's the 10 things we can fix, or what are we thinking about, blah, 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 blah. And they're sort of more process focused. They have a team that can look after it. And the stuff that Matt talked about, I think, is quite important. And seeing the shift of those go from the old, put the letter in the box in front of HR's office to being open and having discussions about it, I think is really important and helps people get that engagement. But I think the second one that I find not more interesting, but I think really highlights the value of Yammer beyond other things is some of the more spontaneous innovations you see once you get that mature network, where it's not necessarily a planned campaign or ideation session. It's people just connecting who had no way of connecting before and solving business problems that maybe couldn't have, like, there was no way that people could connect in the past. I think there's many examples, and I'm sure anyone who's used Yammer for a while would see these even in their own network. I was talking to Matt, you know of the Co-op in the UK, which is a huge organization there. I met with them on Tuesday night, and they're telling me some of their stories. And a lot of the innovation, a lot of this sort of spontaneous, I don't know if anti-innovation is the right word, but it's almost like, leaders, our fearless leaders often have dumb ideas. And it's interesting seeing when you can have a community or a culture inside your organization that is brave enough to speak up and question, and you can get that voice from the front line. This is how it's going to affect our customers, or have you thought through these different aspects? And they had a few different examples where they'd had that where during COVID, they were bringing in some new policies, and they're like, wait a second, guys, I don't think our customers are ready. I don't think our field are ready. Why don't we try these type of things? And they've actually been able to change the way the business works. So I kind of see that as innovation as well, but maybe slightly less focused as the other stuff. So yeah, I think there's lots of stuff. Even, I mean, in Microsoft itself, Yammer, for example, you know, we've been building the new Yammer for 18 months now, and certainly the last 6 months, we've innovated and progressed certain things faster than others based on feedback we're getting from customers around COVID, around how we connect our employees who are now working more remotely, making sure that, you know, if we need to push important messages through to people, they can be able to be seeing that, and you can get feedback quickly. So we see it everywhere all the time, but certainly that having that mature, safe community where people feel like it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to do that, is really, really important.
That's great, Gus. And I've got one more question for you, but just that's a reminder that hopefully this is a safe environment where people feel that they can ask questions. So please go to the chat because we're going to open it up to questions. I've got one last one. Gus, obviously we've got Inspire on this week. Lots of announcements been coming out for new Yammer. What does the rest of the year of Yammer? Well, remember, it's still the year of Yammer. What a year to pick, 2020. What's in store over the next few months till the end of the year?
Yeah, okay, I'll be quick because there's a lot to go through. So this week's a big one. So lots of stuff have shipped this week, including the new Yammer itself is now available to everybody worldwide, so they can go and turn that on, have access. But some other ones, very quickly, we just launched the new Sharepoint Web part this week, so you can now have the new Yammer inside Sharepoint. And we've got some interesting updates with that, with our SharePoint integrations coming in the next few months around sharing, being able to share content from SharePoint into Yammer, like news and pages, and have those render and have those comments within Yammer rendered really nicely. So that's one thing. We also shipped this week the community app on Teams Mobile, so you can now access Yammer through your Teams Mobile. And Swoop actually did a really good blog yesterday or today, I think it was, around the Yammer app and Teams and some of the data they're seeing around that. So that's going to be a big one, I think. Next for that one, which is actually I just got access to this week, is we're having Yammer notifications and search integrate into Teams, which I think is going to be an interesting one. So you can, without having to leave Teams, now you get all your Yammer notifications in that activity feed of Teams, which is nice to get all the things in one spot. In terms of Yammer itself, lots of things, and I'll reel them off really quickly, that's coming in the next few months. We're adding reactions to posts. Again, that was actually one that got expedited because of COVID. People wanted to be more expressive. We're also adding custom reactions, so you can have your own. So if you're running for example, if you're running an innovation campaign, you could give, instead of a like, you could give them your own icon, like a light bulb or whatever it is you want to do. So being able to add custom reactions. We're shipping featured conversations, which you could think of those as a community admin can promote a post inside your organization. So even if you're not part of a group, that post will appear in your feed, and you can set that for a month or so. So it's almost like a promoted tweet or something like that. Again, for helping cut through those important conversations, or if, example, in ANZ, Shane wants to make sure that everyone sees his message, you can make sure that becomes sticky at the top of the feed. Muting communities, which I think is an interesting one. So we had an example that my colleague Steve, created a New Kids on the Block fans community, and we don't necessarily want to see that all the messages from, because there's a lot of New Kids on the Block fans at Microsoft. We don't want to see all their posts in our feed. So admins can actually mute communities, and so those posts, unless you're a member, won't appear in your feed, which again just helps curate that feed. And also from an end user, you can also opt out and mute communities too if you don't want to see specific ones appear in your feed as well. So we're working through that. Default post types for groups, so you can say maybe it's an innovation group or a support group or anything. You can actually set the default post type to a question as opposed to just a normal post, so help making sure you can get that best answer functionality. We're also giving you the ability, which I think is live now, but someone can confirm that, if not very soon, be able to convert a post after you've posted it to a question. So if someone posted something but didn't actually mark it as a question, you can go back and do that retrospectively, so then you also get best answer functionality. We're going to be introducing later this year voting on answers. So maybe there's a couple of answers that might be right, so people can vote answers up to help. And again, I think when you think of the innovation piece, that really lends itself well to that. And finally, we also are working on a new Yammer Embed. Well, not a new, it'll be an update to the existing Yammer Embed, which will take advantage of all the new stuff we shipped. So if you want to embed Yammer in any other HTML application, you'll be able to do that very soon as well. I'll take a break. There's lots of stuff coming. But stick around for Ignite later this year. We'll have more good things to share.
That's awesome. All right, we'll see if we've got any questions, and if not, I know Sharon, you're an ex-journalist. Sharon's also from Swoop, and she's always got a few questions. So we do have another 10 minutes. So please, please open up. I'll hand over to you, Sharon.
Well, lots of questions, Angus, coming in about New Kids on the Block, but we might put those aside for the moment. Ryan, I would like to know a little bit more about, you know, some of these innovations that, well, they've become innovations, just sharing and connecting on Yammer as during the COVID period. What's the engagement been like? You know, how are you measuring that? How are you tracking that?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I forgot to add. I actually had some data points to start off with in terms of engagement through the COVID period. So we normally have about 3,000 logons to Yammer per day. That's kind of the average. During the COVID period, where we set up those communities and used it as a main tool to connect people, we sort of saw a 70% increase. So that's to about 5,200, and then right at the peak, it was like 14,000 logins on one day that we had, which is like kind of blew everybody's minds. It's kind of like that is a huge increase. And then so with the other thing that we're looking at, I think the other thing that we really look for is where we can see that there are people from different countries participating and people from different business units. So we use that. So I think on Swoop, it's really helpful where you sort of look in the community view and you go, you can sort it by business unit or by country, and that's really good for us to see how far something's spread across the organisation. And then I think two-way relationships is the other good one, because that tells us that people are actually talking to each other. So, you know, we try to look for the Swoop metric two-way relationships around about 30% or sort of high 20s. If it's sort of a bit lower than that, then it kind of suggests that people are just talking at each other and not really to each other. So that's a really good way to measure if there's genuine and meaningful conversation going on.
And Ryan, you had some great examples from your CEO, Shane Elliott, and I think was it your deputy CEO, you said Alexis? Yeah. Have you guys had to prompt that? Like, has that come from the internal comms people to say, hey, you got to get on there? Or is this just, you know, something that they're doing to try to connect with people and I guess communicate during a crisis?
Yeah. So it is, to be honest, a mix of both. So we try to play a role of a spotter for our leaders. So if there's an opportunity, a conversation that we think they'll be interested in, or if there's something happening we think would prompt a Yammer post, where we'll sort of give them a nudge. But oftentimes we find that they jump in just as often on their own. And it's often when they jump in on their own that it's more genuine and authentic, and that it works so much better. Like the Lex poll and the Shane video were both their kind of ideas, which we loved. And obviously they were so engaging. The other thing that was really cool is I mentioned we set up that Q&A community, and we sort of set that up and with the premise that, you know, we're not going to actually be able to answer all these questions, because we knew there were just going to be so many questions from people. We said we'll come back to as much as we can, and we'll try to address the key themes. But we actually had, and this is without prompting, we actually had Shane and Alexis jumping into that Q&A community and replying to people, which just, I mean, and that is probably one of the reasons we had such strong engagement. It was, hey, I'm concerned about COVID-19. I don't know what I need to do tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to log into the system. And I can talk to my CEO or my deputy CEO about it on Yammer. Like that's you know, amazing. And that was all unprompted.
Ryan, I know on the call we've got at least one of our other customers who is really struggling to get executives onto Yammer. And how have you got any tips? Like why are your guys so great about sharing these sorts of things? What can others do and learn from you?
Yeah, sure. So it's not easy, I would say, and there's definitely always leaders that who have that kind of natural personality that it will suit, and there'll be leaders that it just doesn't. Like we have leaders that just still don't see the value, and that's fine. It's not going to be for everyone, but when you've got really open, authentic leaders, it's a great platform for them. I think the thing is to play more of a coaching role and to spend, to just constantly reiterate that it's a valuable platform. The thing that works for us is we reinforce to leaders all the time that, it's not a tool for you to spruik, to post, to talk about your initiatives or the things that are working in your part of the business. It's actually a tool for you to listen and for you to learn. So it helps to have an idea of what the leader's objectives and goals are, and then sort of present Yammer in a relevant way. If it is, sometimes it's not, but when there is an opportunity presented as in that way. So just to give a specific example, we had one leader who leads our digital business. She recently partnered with our Australia business, and we decided as a company this is where our digital transformation is going to happen first. And so she actually said two things. She said, I'm not going to go on Yammer if the same 3 people like what I post, and but then we also knew that she really needed to learn about our Australia business. So we went back to her and we said, here's your Swoop network map. You've posted 3 times, and actually there's way more than 3 people that you've already connected with. And here's the Australia business that you said you need to learn more about. They're really active on Yammer. Here's where they're active. Jump in and start making relationships with them, and you can learn more about that part of the business. And that totally changed. That totally converted her. She started to do that and started to realise, hey, this thing's really valuable. So yeah, that sort of stuff works.
Thanks for sharing that. So there's some questions coming in, apparently more, but I can't actually see them. Lauren, would you be able to jump in? Oh, here we go. Sorry, they're just coming through now. How do we know whether the company and community is open to asking questions through the internal social capabilities? Does one just give it a try and test some questions to be curious, or do we need to gauge the environment somehow by waiting for someone like the CEO, deputy CEO starting things off? I guess, Ryan, that's probably directed to you as well.
Yeah, maybe Matt could also have a crack at that.
Matt, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I don't mind jumping on this one. So I think one of the things that we often talk about when kicking off an ideas campaign on, say, Yammer or on Teams is having that internal champion in place to really kick that off. So that's an amazing bit of best practice that we really encourage all of our customers to do. So yeah, having some really visible leadership that's kicking this off, using a video, using even just photos, but some really rich media that brings the challenge to life. If employees see that this is an initiative led by leadership, and that they are sort of being given that space and given that voice, that really encourages them. They feel then that they can talk about ideas freely, and that this is sponsored by the top leadership. So from our side, definitely getting those leaders visible, getting them talking and engaging with ideas on the platforms is a really great place to start. And you'll be able to gauge then sort of if there's any extra internal comms that you need to do to sort of promote the campaign internally. But yeah, starting with a champion kicking this off is a great place to start.
Well, we're nearing the end now, so I've just got one more question for Ryan. Ryan, how long has ANZ used Yammer, and do you have any tips for actually launching Yammer?
Yeah, sure. So we've used Yammer for about 18 months. So quite a while. I should just call out that we had a social collaboration platform in the business before we launched Yammer, so it wasn't sort of our first rodeo. It really wasn't well utilized though. So we did a lot of research to understand why it wasn't and what people wanted from a tool like that, which helped inform our launch strategy. But I don't know if it would be the same for every company, but we launch a lot of stuff. There's always like a new initiative or a new thing coming up at our company. I'm sure it's similar for other big companies, but it's almost like you don't need a launch. A launch is kind of like cool for a bit of awareness, but it is so not going to be the thing that determines your success. It really is ongoing change management, ongoing conversation, identifying those parts of the business that have a Yammer-shaped hole that you can help them fill, and starting small. You know, even if you find a small area of the business, kind of like what Matt was saying about a champion network. If there's an area of the business that are keen, that have a need, start there, get them using it really well, and then show everybody else the value and start, you know, implementing it across the organisation over time.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you. Well, can I just say thank you to everyone. This has been quite a great experiment in terms of having multiple presenters and multiple slides. And behind the scenes, I'd like to thank Lauren and Mel on the Engage Squared team, who've done an awesome job as our producers. We hope you all do well over the next few weeks and months, because certainly we're going to be reliant on ideas and getting feedback from our employees as we sort of shift and work out how we're going to remodel what we're doing, and everyone's sort of going ahead to do that. We will carry on for a while running these things virtually. I'm hoping that we can get together and do some actual events in person. Hopefully by the end of the year, that would be great. We have one more, which I will just call out, which is happening in a week and a half, which is Rob Carrington. Those in Sydney will know Rob, one of my colleagues, has been presenting Microsoft updates a number of times at our business user group, and he is doing something on low code. I'm into no code, but he's going to do low code on high impact apps using the Power Platform. So if you want to register with us for that, that's on the 6th of August at 11 o'clock. Hopefully we can put a little link in the chat, and it's also on our website. And we will do something in the future with Swoop Analytics and Engage Squared, because we've been having great fun doing these things together. It's great to have you, Matt, from Sideways 6 join us from the UK, and I know that you'll do things in the Southern Hemisphere, because we've been talking about that. So I know we'll have more next time we speak. We'll have more cases around APAC to talk about, and Gus, always appreciate collaborating with you on our favourite topic around new Yammer and innovation. So thanks everyone for participating. Stay in touch, and please stay safe. Bye for now.